a very packed agenda today, and we have very important items that we need to get to. And we are looking forward on our agenda. We are moving forward to number 29 on our agenda. The other items we will go back to and do as much as we can after number 29. So this is a flood control district discussion, and its presentation and discussion regarding the wildfire insurance crisis with the insurance industry shares its perspective on the issue. And we are still acting as a Board of Supervisors, not the flood control district, and because this is a countywide issue. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Flood Control District Administrator, Lucinda Andriani, to basically kind of start us off on this.
County. The first session, as you know, was on June 3rd, and that session really provided an overview of this very complex and challenging issue, and that was presented by Kimmy Barrett and Doug Green with Headwaters Economics, who is...
Excuse me, I'm just going to
Sure.
get clarification, because you're right. This says we start and resolve as the Flood Control District Board of Directors. Should we do that?
Yes, Madam
That's
Chair.
why I was asking earlier. Okay. With legal counsel's advice, I will take a motion for us to resolve as a Flood Control District Board of Directors.
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We are now the Flood Control District Board of Directors, and we have our Flood Control District Administrator with us. So please proceed.
Thank you. So as I was sharing, we had a first session on June 3rd, presentations by Headwaters Economics, who is very prominent in this issue across the western U.S., provided a great overview of the issue. For those that may not have been able to participate and they're interested, that presentation and recording of the meeting is on the Flood Control District website. If you go to Wildfire Insurance, there's a little tile there, just hit that and those materials will come up, as will the materials and the recording from today when we're completed here. Today we have a presentation by Ethan Aumann, who is the Senior Director for Environmental Issues and Resiliency with the Insurance Industry Association, known as the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. APCI is the primary national trade association for home, auto, and business insurers. And I want to share their mission. As a leading industry voice, APCIA advances private competitive insurance markets to protect consumers, businesses, and communities. We support a strong and state-based regulatory system and proactive U.S. engagement in the international regulatory discussions to facilitate market growth and stability through proactive education, thought leadership, and advocacy. Mr. Aumann will present the industry's perspective on the issue of wildfire risk and how and why it's impacting insurance availability and rates across the West, and discuss what the industry sees as the necessary steps to address this wildfire risk. Before we begin, I want to share a few comments. At first, I want to say that the wildfire risk in our communities is real. This is not fabricated by the industry to just make money. This is a real issue. We have a real threat. We're in the 94th percentile nationally in terms of wildfire risk done by independent entities. And this risk isn't just with our forested communities, although that is obviously really prominent, but it also affects our grassland and shrub areas as well. If you look at wildfires in the United States, many of the largest wildfires and the ones that have consumed the most homes, and frankly, some that have created the most deaths, have been grassland and shrub wildfires. So I think we think about those areas in our county tend to be less populated, fewer homes, but there is a threat there as well, and I wanted to point that out. Um, I think that, you know, as I mentioned, we're in a high profile. The risk is real and it's impacting our residents. We have gotten several emails and calls in the last, even just in the last week, several of residents who have been denied insurance or canceled insurance and or have seen significant increases in rates. So we've developed this process to educate ourselves and the public about the issue. And that, you know, the intent is to have future sessions that really look at what are the strategies that we can be an element of to address this risk issue. And that's going to take collaboration. It's going to take collaboration with the insurance industry, mortgage companies, our fire districts, some of whom are with us here today. Others are probably online, our fire departments in our communities, our residents, and all levels of government, federal, state, and local. Are we going to have to collaborate to address this issue? The next session will be on September 30th at 2:15. It'll focus on home hardening. What's really coming out of all of the science and the data of evaluating fires is that many of them begin, we've heard this repetitively, as embers and ember wash, firestorms, much like, well, we've seen throughout the West, not just LA by any means. And home hardening is really becoming more and more prominent in terms of the key strategy to reduce the risk. We will have Michael Newman with us from the Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS. They are the leading industry research entity, and they've developed a program called Wildfire Prepared Home, which really identifies what are the things that need to be done to significantly reduce the risk of wildfire to a home. Again, all the presentations and recordings will be on the Flood Control District website. And again, you can stream those as well through the county's YouTube channel if you can't make it into town or if you're in an outlying area. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ethan Amon, Mr. Amon, to share his presentation. And then he's put together, I think, a great set of slides here, providing a good overview. I had also recommended to you, I don't know how many of you had an opportunity, I know Supervisor Ontiveros had an opportunity to look at a video that I shared with you that about the LA firestorm. And I think that's good because it really puts into perspective what is the overarching risk and the issues that are contributing to it, and some of the things that are being looked at to address that risk. With that, I'll turn it over to him, but encourage you and the public. It's a PBS show. It can be, again, downloaded through YouTube if you want more information. It's a great source of information as well. So, Mr. Almond.
All right.
All righty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Lucinda. I trust everyone there can hear me okay.
Yes.
And I'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, or should I call you Flood Control District Commissioners, and community members there as well today. My name is Ethan Amon. I serve as Senior Director, Environmental Issues and Resiliency for APCIA. So in my role, I work on policy solutions for property and environmental insurance issues with an emphasis on risk mitigation and resilience to natural catastrophes. And I just want to thank you for having me here today to discuss this very important issue and provide an insurer's perspective on wildfire risk. So Lucinda covered a little bit of this, but APCIA is the primary national trade association representing about 2/3 of the home, auto, and business insurance market. We have a presence in every community across the nation, including there in Coconino County. I am coming to you from the Denver, Colorado area. We had our own large wildfire event a couple of years ago, the Marshall Fire, that, as Lucinda mentioned, it was actually largely a grassland fire and really tore through a community, devastating impacts and losses there to families and the communities. So our primary mission is protecting people and communities and helping them recover from catastrophic losses. Today, I'll talk really about three main topics. First, I'm going to touch on the current state of U.S. property insurance markets broadly, because I think it provides some helpful context to what's going on kind of at the individual state and community levels. And next, I'll share some insights on how the wildfire peril is evolving amid increasing risk and losses. And then I'll discuss solutions to address these issues. I'm going to be using the term mitigation later in my presentation, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows upfront what I'm talking about. So with respect to wildfire, mitigation is the proactive actions that are taken to lessen the severity and impact of wildfire on people, homes, and communities. So let's start with the current state of the market. The insurance industry is it's receiving a lot of increased attention nationally as housing affordability is at its worst level since the 1980s. And not coincidentally, that was the last time the US economy experienced record high inflation and high interest rates. Homeowners insurance is typically only a relatively small percentage of the overall cost of home ownership, a little more than home maintenance costs, but much less than the escalating cost of property taxes and mortgages due to higher interest rates. But it's the cumulative impact of all these costs that are impacting housing affordability nationwide. Historically, Arizona has had a relatively stable insurance market with a large number of insurance carriers. It's also had homeowners insurance rates that have been lower than the national average. But there are widely different risk factors across the state that impact rates. And Arizona, much like the rest of the country, has seen rates increase significantly in recent years. So why have homeowners insurance rates increased so much recently? Insured losses in the US have been rising rapidly from a combination of factors. These include record high inflation, demographic shifts, economic growth, and increased natural disasters. And insurance is really just a pass-through of these rising costs. So when losses go up, rates also have to go up for insurers to be able to pay their claims. So I'll talk more about those factors driving insurance costs in a little bit, but I wanted to first highlight here the most recent insurance company financial results for Arizona and countrywide. This chart shows the latest underwriting data from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC. They are the group of state insurance regulators. So red values reflect an underwriting loss and black is a profit. So a few things to note. First is that Arizona homeowners insurers, circled in red, have been losing money significantly in recent years. And there's also a lag in this NAIC reporting because it takes time for the claims to be closed and data to be compiled and submitted. But 2024 was also an underwriting loss for homeowners insurers in Arizona. And then the next thing I want you to note is that insurance is typically cyclical. Some years there's maybe a small profit, some years a small loss, but it's more unusual to see sustained losses for 4 or 5 years in a row. And that's just what we're seeing nationally. Last December, the ratings agency AM Best assigned a negative outlook for the entire homeowners insurance market countrywide, and that's citing 5 consecutive years of underwriting losses. So there are kind of 3 big categories or tiers of cost drivers that are leading to escalating property insurance losses. At the top are these macroeconomic pressures from community and economic growth and severe building inflation for building materials and labor, the cost of labor. So next are increasing exposures due to demographic shifts, with people moving into larger, more expensive buildings in disaster-prone areas, such as those vulnerable to wildfire, hurricanes, and flood. It's estimated now that over half of the whole US population lives in metro areas with high risk of a natural disaster. Increasing weather severity is also contributing to these cost pressures. And then finally, state governments sometimes amplify cost pressures by increasing coverage and reporting mandates, trying to artificially suppress rates, and by enabling, in some cases, legal system abuse, which is an increasing area of concern for insurance companies. Let's dive a little bit deeper into just a few of these issues. This graph shows the increase in global insured natural catastrophe losses, which reached $137 billion in 2024 and has roughly doubled over the last decade. In the last 5 years, the losses in the US accounted for 73% of total global natural catastrophe losses. This trend of growing losses is expected to continue to increase roughly 5 to 7% per year. And these growing losses are often misrepresented as being entirely driven by climate change, when in reality, climate is contributing about 1% increase to the losses per year that we're seeing. Yes, we are experiencing more severe weather events. That's what the science tells us, but there are simply more expensive properties being built in harm's way, which are increasingly expensive to replace due to inflation. Persistent inflation, in fact, has made the cost to repair and reconstruct homes and communities after natural disasters significantly higher. Here you can see the cumulative effects of inflation since the COVID-19 pandemic on residential construction and related costs. So early on, construction materials and labor, which are really the red and the green lines, those surged 40 to 60% in just a couple of years. And those trends have kind of flatlined and normalized a bit, but still remain up about 40% cumulatively, affecting claims costs for every type of property loss from now on here. Insurance premiums, which are shown in the green dotted line, is a lagging indicator, meaning that premiums take a year or two to catch up to the economic inflation trends. And this partly explains why property insurers have been losing money in recent years. And it's also why insurance costs have risen in the US to help close the gap between loss costs and the prices that are charged. For many companies, the gap between the premiums coming in and the losses that are being paid out has led to a reduction in their surplus capital. So you can think of that as basically the savings account that insurance companies have to maintain to pay claims. And insurers are required by state regulators to maintain adequate levels of surplus capital. They also aren't allowed to charge whatever they want. They must follow strict actuarial standards where rates reflect risk, and those rates are reviewed and approved by state regulators. So for insurance companies that experienced large reductions in capital, there were some insolvencies following hurricanes in the Southeast, and there have been financial rating downgrades for some other companies across the US. And it's caused insurance companies to, in some cases, pull back from some markets where they're not able to accept the risk. So another factor that's driving insurance costs are demographic changes. The US population grew from around 250 million in 1990 to over 340 million in 2023. And this growth has not been spatially uniform. So we've seen greater population growth in high-risk areas, increasing exposure to various risks and natural disasters. So you could really, in this image here, draw a circle around large portions of the Western US, which have seen tremendous population growth and also have high wildfire risk. In fact, a recent lending tree study found that among the metro areas with the highest wildfire risk, Flagstaff actually has the highest rate of new people moving in. So with that context, I wanted to provide a little bit of information about the overarching trends that are impacting property insurance availability and affordability. But now I want to transition to looking more specifically at the wildfire peril. And across the West, we're seeing a phenomenon that's known as weather whiplash. And this is a situation where there are changing environmental conditions that are more conducive to fire ignitions and spread. So we're seeing warmer conditions, and then in some cases, more extreme rain events, followed by rapid vegetation growth, and then followed by intense heat and prolonged drought that dry out all of this new vegetation. So this all leads to conditions that are really primed for more intense, fast-spreading wildfire. Recent highly destructive wildfires, such as the Marshall Fire in Colorado I mentioned, the Lahaina Fire in Hawaii, and the LA fires earlier this year, were also driven by really extreme wind conditions. So simply put, we're seeing higher severity wildfire events, and we're seeing them more often. As I touched on earlier, community growth is also exploding in fire-prone regions, much more than regions facing other natural disaster risks. So this chart by the real estate company Redfin shows the share of homes built in disaster-prone areas between the year 1900 and 1959 in gray, and then homes built early in this decade in red. And so we're really seeing a dramatic increase in fire risk areas. Urban boundaries have expanded, and more people are living in the wildland urban interface. Redfin also estimates that around 97% of new homes built in Arizona today face elevated wildfire risk, as well as significant heat and drought risk as well. So these changing environmental conditions and building patterns are contributing to much larger, costlier wildfires, some called megafires. Here you can see that global insured wildfire losses in the last decade were more than 5 times higher than prior decades. And a lot of the recent losses have been driven by wildfires in California. In fact, 8 of the top 10 costliest insured wildfires in the world have occurred in the US since 2017. But these issues aren't isolated to California. We're seeing a growing number of conflagration fires, these fires that spread through communities and destroy a large number of houses and personal property across multiple Western states, some during high wind events, and resulting in really the costliest and deadliest losses in history. So this list is the top 20 fires just in the US ranked by insured losses. So let's look now at wildfire risk in Coconino County. And these charts are from a public wildfire viewer, risk viewer that's developed and maintained by the US Forest Service. It's called wildfirerisk.org. There's another useful website for visualizing these types of risk factors, and that's the National Risk Index. So this website includes interactive maps like what's shown on the left, and resources to help communities understand, explore, and reduce wildfire risk. In the graph on the right, you see this site ranks Coconino County in the 96th percentile for counties at risk for wildfire. And Flagstaff specifically is estimated as having a higher wildfire risk than 99% of communities in the US. This public-facing wildfire viewer is different than the risk models used by insurance companies. So these that I'm showing here and similar publicly available wildfire maps do not influence insurance rates or coverage determinations. But as an industry, we strongly support the development of public hazard maps to help inform public policy, help inform building codes, and for education for consumers and communities about risks. So insurers leverage risk models, which are much more granular in nature to help assess individual parcel risk. These computer models consider many additional factors that can change more frequently. So that is like mitigation done at the individual property level, or evolving fuel loads and conditions due to forest treatment projects and things of that nature that really help better inform the extent of potential loss that could occur in an individual policy term for a specific insurer. Characterizing wildfire risk is one of the most complex challenges in the insurance industry today. Wildfire behavior isn't driven by a single factor. It's the product of really dozens of different interacting variables. So we're looking at terrain, vegetation, wind speed, drought conditions, the presence of ignitable fuels, and even small changes in any one of these factors can dramatically alter a fire's spread and intensity. So on top of that, we have to factor in human elements like community preparedness, road access, fire suppression capacity. In places like Coconino County, where the landscape is quite diverse and weather patterns can change quickly, modeling becomes even more nuanced. So a home just a mile away from one similar home may have a completely different risk profile depending on its location and the different factors involved. So this level of complexity means that insurers are using highly sophisticated models and tools, including satellite data, real-time fire simulations, and loss data to really accurately assess and then price risk. And it's important to note that wildfire catastrophe models are complex, but they're not black boxes. These models are often developed by third parties, very specialized companies that are informed by decades of research and incorporate the latest science. In some places, models are showing wildfire risk that's just simply higher than in previous decades. Additionally, there are more regulatory oversights to help ensure that consumers are protected and insurers can maintain solvency in the event of a large wildfire or another natural disaster. So in the next slide, I'm going to dive just a little bit more in detail on wildfire catastrophe models. And I'll share up front, there's a lot of information on this slide, but I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk through some of it and the main factors to consider here. So with more data available and advancements in technology and analytics, catastrophe models have increasingly served as a critical tool to manage risk. And these models are principally a financial tool. They're designed to help quantify the financial impact of a range of potential future disasters by informing where future events are likely to occur and then how intense those events could be. So while catastrophe models, the individual models may differ, here you can see some examples of the various factors that wildfire models might consider. As I mentioned before, these look at numerous factors, the interactions between weather and vegetation, as well as topography and other variables. The models may also consider community and parcel specific factors, such as defensible space or the construction materials that a home is made of. They might leverage aerial imagery, such as satellite data to help assess vegetation that's next to a home, or use other data records to verify a building's features, such as siding material and type of building materials. So the primary importance of these catastrophe models is to ensure that insurance companies have enough capital to be able to cover very high severe events. These data inputs collectively, the output from wildfire models, contribute to what's known as a wildfire risk score. And so how your home is constructed and its proximity to where fire is more likely to originate and spread will vary. So consequently, homes on the same street may have different risk scores. Risk scores can also vary by catastrophe model for the same property. And that's based on the specific model inputs, the source of that data, and how the model itself is designed. And so it's really important to understand that a wildfire risk score is just one of many factors that insurers consider when underwriting and pricing. And the extent that that risk score is relied upon versus other rating factors is also going to vary by company. So for example, there may be some companies that have a stronger financial position and able to assume more risk in their portfolio, So they may choose to accept properties with higher risk scores. And there may be some that actually even specialize in accommodating properties with high wildfire risk. So I'll also mention on this slide that the aftermath of a large fire that enters communities is uniquely challenging versus other perils too, because data shows that over 90% of homes that ignite in a wildfire are a total loss. So this results in very high loss severity due to the loss of the entire structure, the personal property inside, and the intensity of the fire may even damage foundations and other features. So this all requires lengthier debris removal and environmental cleanup costs prior to even the home being able to be reconstructed. So there are additional living expenses where residents are out of their home for a considerable amount of time. For other disasters like hail or tornado, for instance, maybe only part of the home was damaged, or a temporary repair might allow the homeowner to move back in while the rest of the home is repaired. So wildfire is really uniquely challenging in that way. So these circumstances have led to various legislative proposals in Western states to try and provide consumers with more coverage benefits and lengthier timeframes in the recovery process. And while these proposals are all largely well-intentioned, this broadening of coverage creates higher costs and more volatility for insurers to model and price wildfire risk. In our advocacy, we stress that wildfires are a natural and essential part of many landscapes, and we simply cannot suppress all fires. We also can't overregulate markets or price our way out of natural catastrophe risk. Unfortunately, many of the policy proposals that we've seen introduced in Western states have increased exposures and costs, including regulatory compliance burdens or constraints in managing exposures. For example, in response to underwriting and pricing actions, several states have considered constraining the use of catastrophe models, including requiring mandatory disclosures and appeals processes related to risk scores that I described earlier. And so these changes require really complex and costly actions on the insurer side to actually operationalize and roll out. And those extra resources and costs hit smaller insurers particularly hard. Some states have also enacted laws that allow moratoriums on canceling or non-renewing insurance following a disaster. And this leads to greater uncertainty in the ability for an insurer to manage its exposure, which can inadvertently lead to companies pulling back in a market. So unfortunately, some of these policies or programs that I'm describing fail to address the real underlying issue that's resulting in market disruption. And they can also have some unintended consequences. So we ultimately believe that policymakers shouldn't focus on programs that simply hide or mask risk by growing costs or shifting risk onto state-based plans, but instead address the underlying costs themselves through mitigation. And so now I'm going to transition to really talking about solutions. So we know that when homes are mitigated to be more resilient, they are more likely to survive a disaster, and that greatly improves insurability. A primary goal is to build alignment among stakeholders around the science to reduce potential losses. So as I mentioned previously, our top policy priorities include improving policies related to where and how we build, such as better land use policies and stronger building codes. And we're also encouraging states and communities to have really a data-driven approach to identify and communicate risk to residents, as well as having resources to help support community action. There are also additional infrastructure and emergency response needs, such as strengthening utility equipment and additional firefighting resources. APCIA has been proactively lobbying state and federal legislators well as agencies to support these stronger mitigation and resiliency goals. Insurers fund and support the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. And Lucinda briefly mentioned this, and I believe you will have a presentation on IBHS or from IBHS next time, but touch on a little bit of their work here. IBHS performs scientific research on how to reduce impacts from natural disasters impacting residential and commercial buildings. So in the wildfire space, they've developed a science-based program known as Wildfire Prepared. And items in the sort of orange, reddish, brown color at the bottom are elements that are viewed as critical actions to reduce risk from embers, while the items that are shown in blue provide another layer of protection against direct flame. And we focus first and foremost on the ember piece, since overwhelming majority of homes that burn in wildfire are ignited from embers. One of the most important elements is establishing a 5-foot non-combustible zone in the space immediately around the home. And research has shown that property owners who clear the vegetation and other combustible material from that perimeter can nearly double their structure's likelihood of surviving a wildfire. So in addition to that ember-resistant buffer around the home, we also recommend homes having Class A fire-rated roofs, and then other external features such as ember-resistant vents and a minimum distance of 6 inches from the ground to any combustible materials that are on the exterior walls. Kind of at the higher level of resilience, homeowners can consider non-combustible siding. They should be looking at non-combustible fences and gates and installing multi-pane tempered glass windows. And then there are also additional actions for attached decks and sheds and other structures that may be present on the property. And also I'll mention here that really regular maintenance, like clearing debris from roofs and gutters and trimming trees and shrubs, removing dead vegetation, all of these are important elements as well that's ongoing. And those can't just be like a one-time action. They really need to be done on a regular basis. IBHS recently launched a 90-minute online learning course that helps homeowners better understand the science of wildfire and some of their research-based actions that can reduce risk there. So unique to the wildfire peril, community-level mitigation is also needed, since a structure that ignites can pose a risk to other adjacent structures. So IBHS developed a neighborhood version of their wildfire prepared home program. The neighborhood version requires homes around the perimeter of a community to have a higher level of defense than homes inside the community. Now I'll just show a few examples of some mitigation in action. On the left is a home that's been called the Red Roof House or a Miracle House, and it survived the 2023 Lahaina fire in Hawaii. And then on the right is another illustration of the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home program elements. But this Red Roof House is a historic home that had a restoration project completed in 2022. And according to the owners, they removed about 5 layers of asphalt shingle roofs or an asphalt roof and installed a commercial grade metal roof that included an air pocket to allow heat to dissipate. And then at the ground level, they removed all vegetation along the house's drip line and added a stone buffer. And this was a step that they took not to protect against fire, actually, but to protect against termites. So while these strategies weren't intended for wildfire mitigation, they ultimately were consistent with the work of IBHS to create that ignition-resistant zone around the house. And so as a result of these renovations and upgrades, this home sustained only very minimal damage, where, as you can see, the rest of the homes in the community were a total loss. So what's increasingly clear from research in this example is that mitigation can really result in a meaningful decrease in losses, which when done at scale should positively impact the availability and affordability of insurance for consumers. Working with IBHS, the town of Paradise, California, which was devastated by the Camp Fire in 2018, is rebuilding their community to a higher building and defensible space standard. So they're actually the first community in California to adopt the wildfire prepared home framework into their local ordinance and are requiring all new and rebuilt homes to meet and maintain this designation. On June 22nd of 2022, this home in Paradise, shown in these images, was the first home in the country to receive the new IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home designation. And at least one major insurance company has announced plans to re-enter the Paradise market as a result of their adoption of the IBHS standard. 7 months later, a home in Chino Hills, California, was the first to receive the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Plus designation. So this includes some of those additional mitigation actions that I talked about, upgraded windows and doors, non-combustible siding, and some other alterations. And then in March of this year, a new community that was built by KB Homes in Escondido, California, was the first to be recognized as an IBHS wildfire resilient neighborhood. So in California, the difference in cost to build a home to the new IBHS wildfire prepared home designation has been shown to be less than about $3,000. So recognizing this minimal difference versus the cost to later retrofit existing structures, we're seeing communities and commitments from some volume home builders in the West to build new homes in wildfire areas to this IBHS standard. Creating a defensible space against wildfire does not necessarily mean sacrificing curb appeal. It doesn't require a fortune also to make changes that can meaningfully reduce risk. CSAA Insurance Group, IBHS, and UC Berkeley recently sponsored a design contest for innovative, affordable ideas for homeowners that emphasize wildfire defense while still preserving attractiveness. So most of the homes that are ignited in wildfire are due to embers, which I mentioned. So that mitigation, especially in the 5-foot zone closest to the home, is most critical and can involve some simple changes that improve safety without necessarily sacrificing a kind of a visually appealing landscape. Also, fire-resistant features like stucco, stone, fire cement siding, gravel pathways, these can all serve as effective wildfire-resistant barriers. So when choosing wildfire resilient landscaping, the focus should be on selecting plants also that have a high moisture content and don't accumulate large amounts of dead material. Oftentimes there are native drought tolerant plants that are less flammable than traditional landscaping that can provide fire safety and landscaping that's suited to the local climate. So for homeowners, in Coconino County, in particular, where maybe there's more forested or more remote areas, creating defensible space doesn't mean clear cutting your entire property and removing all trees and vegetation, leaving some kind of barren moonscape or something. Defensible space can involve strategic thinning, pruning, and the use of fire-resistant plants and different materials to break up fuel continuity and to really slow the spread of a potential fire. The Colorado State Forest Service, here in my state where I live, recommends a layered approach with the most stringent fuel reduction in the area directly around the house and becoming less restrictive further out. And so, properly spaced trees and shrubs with pruned lower branches can help prevent fire from climbing up into the canopy and leading to a much bigger fire that way. Also, I'll just mention briefly again that clearing the vegetation and keeping gutters free of debris and that ongoing maintenance is also essential. The IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Program is currently available in California and Oregon, but a handful of other states are considering adopting its framework for certification. However, I'll mention that just because Arizona isn't yet certified, it doesn't mean that residents can't follow the guidance and take some of the actions to mitigate their property. Increasingly, insurance companies are using catastrophe models for the reasons I mentioned earlier, but also to help provide mitigation discounts to reduce consumer costs. So what's crucial to understand with any kind of insurance discount is that the science has to show that wildfire mitigation results in a meaningful reduction in risk. And this often is a comprehensive set of actions that taken together will create a meaningful risk reduction. And I guess I'll also mention too, as I highlighted earlier, that these actions typically need to be done at the community scale to really reduce risk to the greatest extent possible. And that's very different than other perils and poses some unique challenges for insurers in terms of how they must verify wildfire mitigation and then in turn model an appropriate discount to provide to consumers. Just have a couple more slides here. I want to talk about on this slide some actions that communities are taking to build wildfire resilience. The National Association of Counties maintains a website with different resources, strategies, and case studies to help county leaders mitigate wildfire risks and build resilience in their communities. I really like this image on the left that shows the different elements making communities safer and that are all sort of grounded and share kind of that science basis in the core element there. The list on this slide, these are just some examples of where communities are taking action, and we haven't exhaustively reviewed these programs, and these are just a handful of examples, not intended to be an exhaustive list. But really the actions taken by these and other counties demonstrate how local governments can proactively reduce wildfire risk and help stabilize insurance markets. So some of them are adopting maps that identify wildfire hazard zones and enacting new codes and ordinances that require fire-resistant construction materials. Counties are also leading or collaborating on the development of community wildfire protection plans, which lay out strategies for addressing wildfire risk. And then some are also offering incentive programs and education to help encourage residents to create defensible space around their homes and the use of fire-resistant landscaping and materials. Finally, I'll mention that they're collaborating with private, state, and federal partners to implement cross-boundary fuel treatment and defensible space projects as well. So these efforts just provide a model or some examples for mitigating risk and protecting property that communities can take. And finally, I wanted to mention some options to help consumers build resilience to wildfire. So we strongly support states in providing funding and incentives to support mitigation. We believe it's important to employ a really holistic strategy of incentives, which together are all aligned and reinforcing the same desired actions. So for example, states and communities can establish resilience grants to help grant programs, to help property owners take some of these actions to make their properties more resilient. Some have established funds that provide low interest loans for resilience projects, or there's even the idea of allowing mitigation costs to be incorporated into a mortgage when a property changes hands, that then allow the cost of that mitigation to be spread out over 20 or 30 years. Communities can also provide rebates or waive building permit fees for the completion of certain resilience designations, such as the Wildfire Prepared Home Program. And then also governments can offer a variety of tax credits, such as credits for retrofitting homes or businesses, sales tax credits for materials that are purchased to retrofit homes, or property tax credits for properties that achieve and maintain a certain resilience designation. And then finally, communities can also highlight really some of the other benefits of increased resilience, such as higher property resale values. We've seen that homes that are mitigated to a higher standard typically sell for higher values than non-mitigated homes. And these homes also have improved insurability and then avoided loss costs from different potential disasters. And then to help consumers better manage the disaster risk, insurers generally also support a three-pronged approach to disaster preparedness. And this includes pre-disaster mitigation to reduce risk, increased risk sharing through the use of catastrophe deductibles, and where they are available, the use of tax-advantaged financial savings accounts to cover the cost of disaster-related expenses. A couple of states have approved savings accounts that are tax-advantaged, similar to a 401k or a health savings account, but for disaster preparedness. And this is something that has even been proposed at the federal level as well. Oops, sorry, go back one. There we go. So in closing, really, I just wanted to highlight that addressing the wildfire challenge requires a collaborative effort. Insurers, policymakers, communities, and individual homeowners all working together to build resilience. And ultimately, we think the best solution to address wildfire risk and ensure insurance availability and affordability lies in these robust, science-based mitigation efforts at both the individual and community levels. So programs like the Wildfire Prepared Home and neighborhood programs demonstrate the steps that can be taken to significantly reduce wildfire risk and potentially qualify for insurance incentives. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention today, and we look forward to working together on these critical issues. And not sure of your scheduling, but I am available for some questions if there is time.
Yes, thank you so much for your information, and I'm sure there will be, we do have some time for some questions. I'm going to open it up to the board, but Ethan, before we do that, I have a question to ask you. And, you know, we in Coconino County have for quite some time been looking at the working and educating and working with our community members on basically fire hardening homes, doing defensible spaces, working with their neighbors to try to help bring more fire resilient neighborhoods. We've been working with the Forest Service doing extensive landscape scale forest restoration projects. We've been working with our emergency management, if you will, to also help with the detection and the fire and fighting of wildfires. And here's where we are here in Coconino County. We have a situation where a number of our existing communities, existing property owners who are doing what they can to do defensible spaces around their home, doing removal of limbs and trees around their homes. But no matter what they do, they can't get property insurance or I'm sorry, homeowners insurance, or their homeowners insurance rates have gone up so greatly, they're having a difficult time affording homeowners insurance. And, you know, so we would love to get, if we could, a checklist from the insurance companies on what homeowners need to do so that they can be considered for homeowners insurance or possibly even have a discounted rate. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate that everybody's home in paradise got burned down, and so they are able to build new on different standards. Thankfully, for most of us, that's not where we are here. And yet we're in this crisis now. So what can we do to work with the insurance companies to get a checklist, if you will, to assist in taking the actions we can as individual property owners or even neighborhoods to make sure we have homeowners insurance coverage?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. I mean, you really highlight the complexity and challenges that wildfire presents in Coconino County there and communities like yours across the West. And I guess I'd respond by saying that, we understand kind of the challenges that you're grappling with and the impact that wildfire risk and growing risk factors have caused. And we also share your concerns and want to assure you that the insurance industry is a committed partner in finding meaningful long-term solutions to these problems. So I'd say one of the key elements is having a program that like the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Program, and it's understandably a new program. It's just being rolled out in select places and select properties. But that is the type of certification science-based program that insurance companies and others and other stakeholders in the community are embracing as the standard that should be met and includes, I should say, kind of an inspection and certification process. And so it's that level of mitigation and certification that insurance companies need to be able to recognize meaningful reduction in risk, and will really, when implemented, the individual parcel level, but then broadly over time at the community scale, will really have a meaningful impact to impacting affordability and availability of insurance. So I know that's not an immediate overnight solution. IBHS should hopefully be able to provide some more information, maybe in terms of the status of their rolling out of that program across the West. But their guidance and resources for property owners exists today, and homeowners can look at that and strive to meet that level of mitigation. And I'll also mention too that we encourage residents to work closely with an independent insurance agent who's familiar with the Arizona market and your region in particular, and be able to shop for coverage with multiple carriers. That there's what's called the standard admitted market, where insurance premiums rates are submitted to the state and regulated at that level. But there is also a non-standard market, or what's called the excess and surplus lines insurers. And these are insurers that kind of offer specialized insurance products and focus a lot of times on high risk properties, and may have specialized expertise in areas where there's greater chance of wildfire. And so those, in some cases, can provide a vital alternative for properties with a unique risk profile or who are unable to find coverage through a traditional insurer.
Any other questions, Supervisor Ontiveros?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Almond, for your presentation today. And in your introduction, our Flood Control District Administrator stated that you are the second in a series of presentations that we have been having. In the first presentation that we had in June, that was the first time that I became aware of what you're referring to as a certification program. Can you speak to that certification program? Is it currently in Arizona? Are homeowners currently able to access that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, the certification program, well, there are several perhaps programs, but the certification program that I mentioned is from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS, and it's their Wildfire Prepared Home Program. It is a relatively new program. It just in the last couple of years has been rolled out, and they targeted California first and foremost because of the devastating wildfires that they've had throughout the state in recent years. And so it's beginning to be adopted there, and it's also been adopted in Oregon. And now there are a handful of other states that are looking into the adoption of that program, and Arizona is among them. So I believe IBHS is coming to speak with you next time, and so they could perhaps provide a little bit more detail on where that process stands. But I think I mentioned too that just because the certification isn't yet in place in Arizona, that is the model that stakeholders are kind of rallying around, and following their guidance is going to be the best bet for improving insurability going forward in the future. And so that's the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home, and then they also have a neighborhood program. But there are other programs like Fire Safe, which is I think a little more. It's kind of a self-certified, voluntary type program that communities can opt into, but it's less robust. What makes the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home program really critical and distinct is that it has an independent certification and evaluation. And that really is key. Like I mentioned, that insurance companies don't just want to see a box checked, like, oh, I did this or I have this. It's best if a property has been certified to meet a certain level of mitigation so that they can then factor those elements into the modeling and understanding of risk that way. So that's what I'd highlight there. And I think you will hopefully learn more soon on that program and its status in Arizona.
Supervisor Vasquez.
Yes, thank you for that in-depth presentation. It's really interesting seeing the national data and just knowing how much of a risk we are here in Coconino County and in particular Flagstaff. I was really interested in the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Neighborhood Program. My question is, what do you do if you have some neighbors that refuse to comply? Is there some work around that? Is there a way to, like, if you get 95% of the neighbors in that neighborhood, can those houses still get that benefit, or does it have to be 100% of the homeowners to buy in? Because as you know, here in Coconino County, we do have areas where folks just refuse to comply or refuse to engage. And so how do you mitigate that if it's punishing the whole community or that particular neighborhood if you have a couple holdouts?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I understand that kind of dealing with some holdouts like that who are unwilling to participate in a community-wide program can certainly be frustrating. And from our perspective, the strength of wildfire defense is unfortunately the kind of the weakest link, that a single non-compliant home can pose significant risk to the entire neighborhood, as embers that are blown by the wind and can travel large distances don't respect a certain property line or anything like that. So IBHS may have a better answer for you when they come to speak, but I'd say focusing on the education of wildfire risk and not necessarily the fact that it is mandated, but that it is an improvement that benefits individuals as well as the community is critical to try and get buy-in there. There could be situations, I suppose, where there's financial constraints that make it challenging for some property owners to be able to meet the standard, and that's kind of where the other pieces of the puzzle hopefully would fit in, where there's a mitigation program and certification, but then there are these also grant programs maybe to help individual homeowners take some of those actions. And we've even seen instances where the grants can be directed toward the a means tested approach where lower income or vulnerable individuals can receive preference for those. And I'll mention too, a couple ideas keep popping into my head that IBHS has some terrific educational videos that illustrate all of this really, and maybe they'll show you some of these in person, but really illustrate the difference between a home that's mitigated and one that's not. They have online, you can find them simulated fires that will just rip through a structure that's not mitigated and a structure that's right next to it that's been built to a higher standard and looks virtually identical, very similar at least, withstood direct flame and flying embers and things. So, you know, it's certainly a challenge, and where kind of engagement and education and involving a lot of stakeholders is really a critical piece of the puzzle, I think.
Supervisor Fowler.
You somewhat answered my question that I was going to ask, which is, are you aware of any grants that may be available to help communities, either neighborhood or community or individuals? I think that's, just to upgrade your house with your roof, your siding, and surrounding, and even the, site buildings, all the infrastructures, that's very costly. So just wondering if you're aware of any grants that we should be aware of so that we can help our communities.
Yeah, that's a great question and a critical piece. Kind of the base level mitigation standard for wildfire prepared includes some of the lower cost elements. So that's a good place to start with achieving that level of designation. Now, the kind of the plus version is requiring some of the more costly upgrades like non-combustible siding and replacing windows or some of those elements. So that would certainly be an area that some individuals may need financial assistance or creative ways to help fund those projects. And so it really, we need a toolbox that includes lots of different tools. That maybe there are state funds, state tax incentives, and rebates available, community funds if the resources are available for those. Unfortunately, I think it's largely a community by community basis for where there are grants. I know in my county where I live, just in the last year or two, there was a program put in place that directed state resources to help fund wildfire mitigation projects. And there was an application process where homeowners had an inspector come out and identify what needs to be done, estimate a cost, and then submit a proposal. And then, a number of those were selected for funding in the first year. And, it's a program that intends to be funded continue, into the future. But we need more of those types of investments where available. There are, I think, possibly some federal programs to look into or consider. There's it's administered by the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm not exactly sure on the status of its funding. I think it was part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed a few years ago, but that was intended to help provide grants to communities to help them develop wildfire protection plans and implement some projects that reduce wildfire risk. It could be too that FEMA, again, this is a little up in the air right now. I'm not sure exactly where the funding stands present day, but they also have hazard mitigation grants through FEMA. Those are intended to help communities respond to risk of natural hazards, but I'm not sure on their their current status. So those might be places to start. And this is why we're out there virtually every day advocating for action and programs and legislation at the federal and state levels that can help fund and implement some of these types of resilience and mitigation projects.
And of course, we've been looking at a lot of these grants, wildfire defense grants, FEMA hazard mitigation grants. These unfortunately aren't new to us. The fact that the money's not there is continues to make it difficult for us. But I also know that City of Flagstaff is doing some IBHS home assessments, from what I understand, which is within the City of Flagstaff. And I know we're also taking a look at our WUI code. And, so we're trying to move forward in all of these different areas. And I think what you're saying is it's going to be a long and laborious process as we try to move forward, both on an individual basis and a community or neighborhood basis and on a government basis, is what it sounds to me like.
Yeah, unfortunately, there aren't any kind of very quick, fast fixes that that will solve these challenges. And to your point, it's a long-term investment and ongoing investment. And but fortunately, we are seeing increasing attention, exponentially so. I think, just in the last few years, awareness of the issue with wildfires happening in LA and Hawaii and these various towns across the West, we are seeing really a steady drumbeat of communities and leaders advocating for more action and more resources. And I think we're hopeful that that with partnerships and engagement of stakeholders, that we can make a meaningful difference and help communities protect themselves from these types of challenges.
Well, and we certainly hope that we can partner with the insurance industry to do just that. And, mitigation is, as you say, key. And I think there are some things that we continue to work with our communities and individual homeowners on to try to protect their homes. And I think we're going to continue to do that, needless to say. One of the areas I know that we've received some information on is possibly early detection of wildfires or the beginning of wildfires. I know we've had some information on a company called EmberSafe, which is basically suborbital satellites, quite frankly, or drones, to be able to detect the absolute beginning of a fire from a very large area, over a very large area. I mean, I think that's something else is to try to work on is early detection, not only mitigation, but early detection of wildfire before it gets to a catastrophic state and ends up burning literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of acres. So, and we continue to work with the Forest Service for our landscape scale forest restoration to again help to the reduction of catastrophic forest fire. But we're kind of dealing with the immediate needs of providing insurance, homeowners and coverage. And, quite frankly, I know you made the comment about legislative proposals tend to increase costs and increase volatility, but I really don't know what else we can do at this point. And if I'm missing something, Ethan, please let me know.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your strong engagement and attention to these issues. The solutions are really centered around mitigation. I think there are legislative actions that include good intentions and some good ideas, but it's how they're operationalized or implemented that can have some unintended consequences. So we stand by certainly and are advocating and working with state leaders and legislators to try and implement changes that will have a meaningful impact while, informing them or educating of some of the unintended consequences that may not result in the best outcomes as well. So it's a fine line, I think, there.
It's a difficult one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Supervisor Begay.
Thank you, Ethan, for the presentation. I just want to, it seems like it's so far to reach to get to where we want to go. Because we've been discussing homeowners insurance left, almost all the time with the Board of Supervisors. And, it just seems like it's so far reached out to, and it's going to be hard, to really move forward with it, but it's going to take a lot of people to really get engaged, I think, the city, the county, and the legislatures, and because we need to do something with this. And every year we're faced with a lot of sometimes fire, sometimes flood, and the homeowners are asking us, what are we going to do? What are your plans? Help us. And it just seems like it's a dead end at all here and there. So I'm just kind of thinking that where do we start? I think that we really need to start thinking about that as the Board of Supervisors and the administration here, and with the help of the homeowners, I think we really need to buckle down and find out who can really, help us that has done it. I'm thankful that, Ethan is here and he gave us some base, and, I think we need to keep moving on it, because we can't afford to have the homeowners lose out each and every time. And, they're doing their part. We're doing the mitigations. We're looking for funding, working with Forest Service, and everything is there. But it's just, how do we start? Where do we start? And, how do we get the homeowner insurance is intact? And right now, as a presentation was made, in 2 areas in California have it. So I'm just sitting here thinking, this is something we have to all work on together, and it's going to take a while, but we just have to keep plucking at it, and trying to make sure that we ask and get the right kind of technical assistance, and also it's going to cost funding. There's a lot of funds that we would have to be looking at, and then of course we're talking about grants, tax credits, and insurance incentives, and all this and that will have to come, once we get this thing in order somewhere. So thank you so much for your presentation, and I thank my colleagues for, I'm pretty sure they're in the same boat too, the way I feel that it's just something that we've been trying to work on as, homeowners insurance. And so thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you.
I'll just
Thank
say
you.
thank you again for the engagement and interest. It sounds like your community is taking a lot of steps, and holding this series of informative sessions, I think, is a really important piece as well.
Thank you for your input on this, and appreciate your partnership with us as we move forward on this extremely difficult problem. And any other grants or proposals that come your way that you think might be able to help our community, please let us know.
Certainly will, and hope to stay engaged. And yes, please feel free as well to reach out if there's anything that we can be of assistance with.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention to this. I think it's really important to hear and understand the industry's perspective today. I think that's a valuable piece of this issue. I think, one of the pieces that I still see not engaged is how do we engage the mortgage companies and banks in providing the products to support this kind of work in homes that they in effect own, right? We own our homes, most of us own our homes in conjunction with mortgage companies or banks. And where are they in this? And that's something I'll be following up with Ethan on. I think for the board and your role, some of the key questions that are going to come out of the next set of work sessions is, how do you want to deal? There's a whole realm of codes that is part of the discussion. There's a whole realm of the certification program and how does that get implemented? Who funds that? Who goes out and actually does that work? Do we figure out how to get funding for the fire districts to do that? Is it a county program, part of a county, our building officials' role? Where does that live and how do we implement something like that? Because clearly the communities who frankly are making the most progress, they're focusing in on the certification programs. And so, and particularly the Wildfire Prepared Home program. So I think those pieces are going to be key questions that are going to, we're going to have to consider. And what is your role in that? What do you want your role to be? And where would the funding come from? And so we just have to march forward. And we have started, but you're right, it's a long ways and it's a complex issue.
Here's my concern. First of all, first and foremost, we're going to continue to do our educational outreach on an individual basis with individual homeowners. And I know the city of Flagstaff is also taking a look at the certification process. Excuse me just one moment. So 'cause I can't hear you over there, nor can anybody else, but let me finish if I could, please. So, and I think it would be great to work in conjunction with what they are doing as well, because I'm not sure I know 100% on what they are doing.
Yep, that's one of the future sessions.
And I actually, again, here's the concern that I continue to have. And we've said it, I think everybody up here has said it. And that is that what can we do that we can get the insurance companies buy-in on being able to reduce insurance costs or provide insurance? That's what my concern is. So, I mean, it's like if we do 15 somersaults and 2 backflips and we're able to get a certification, is that enough?
And that has, that is what is being advanced in other areas is, the Wildfire Prepared Home and certification program that then is producing, insurability. That's where it appears to be going. But there are challenges to that because you do have to have some level of adoption of that within a community. You can't just have a 1 or 2 properties
And
out of
that's the
700.
Second part,
Right.
there's the individual, then there's the neighborhood.
We have to work with the insurance companies and frankly, the mortgage companies to understand, for any given community, let's say Kachina Village or Munns Park, let's take, we have both fire chiefs here. How do we come to an understanding in those areas? What is the critical mass, right? And then how do we go about achieving that, working with people? And what is that process?
Well, and then I think there's a third element here, and that's government, whether it be local government, state government, and possibly even federal government. And so I think all 3 of these need to be looked at: individual, neighborhood, and government.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supervisor Fowler.
When we talk about government, it's really the state of Arizona, the state legislators, they're in the studying mode. They don't have any, as far as I know, legislations that have been introduced. Arizona Department of Insurance and Finance Institution, they convene a task force and they're doing a study now. And I don't know when that's going to be done and what the results of the
Yeah,
study.
what
will
we
be.
understand relative to the DIFI process, I believe tomorrow is their last session.
Okay.
And then they expect to have a report out by the end of the year, early next year is what we're being told. There is a discussion going on right now, really being led by Coconino County and Pima County to look at potential legislation for next year. Is there, working with stakeholders, insurance industry and others, is there some type of measures that we can come to a consensus on to take to the legislature? So that's an ongoing conversation taking place too.
That's why.
And they'll CSA, there's going to be a resolution to try to achieve CSA support for that type of effort.
Yeah, and for us to know what to introduce, we have to go through this educational
Right,
process.
exactly.
And then in Congress, there are a number of bills that are moving through, and they're all very different too.
There are, the federal level of regulatory involvement is very limited, as you noted in his presentation. It's state regulated. And yeah,
It is for now. I'm not sure, though, we can continue that. I mean, we have,
yeah,
for example, flood insurance is federal.
is a federal.
And I think we need to look at all aspects on this.
And,
So-
and also a program that's bankrupt, right? So, it's
well,
not,
That's,
yeah.
so, and one thing that may be helpful for the people that are here is how we in Coconino County, I think this is what you were asking, although I can't really hear you over there, is how are we getting this information out to the public for their, what they can do individually, what they can do as a neighborhood,
Mhm.
and what we are looking at as a local government.
I think we need an overarching, Melissa's here, communication effort. That's part of what this has been about. There are a number of materials that are online. He mentioned some more today that I want to make sure that we get to the website. There's Melissa. I think we need to develop an overall communication plan and then work, with our partners in the communities, fire districts and other districts that are within our outlying areas that have that day-to-day connection with those, community members through your offices, et cetera, getting the information out. We've had good engagement with the media on this issue. So that's a good sign.
Well, and I thought, we get our quarterly newsletters that go out. We always include what they can do for fire hardening homes, what they can do to maintain a defensible space. I mean, I think that we have tried in many different areas, whether it be online, on our websites, whether it be on getting the information out on our quarterly news paper inserts that go out to the public, whether it be on our own individual Facebook or social media pages. And it sounds like maybe it's not enough. So I think it would be a good idea to do a more extensive information for the public. And I think we continue to work with City of Flag and the other municipalities, since quite frankly, most, but not all of our homeowners live within those areas. And I know it's frustrating for us. I'm sure it's frustrating for most of the people in the audience that we are in a situation that has been rated one of the top fire, what did they call it?
Fire risk area.
Fire risk areas in the country. And, no matter, all of our best work and efforts on trying to reduce that on a landscape scale with the Forest Service, on our educational outreach, and obviously it's not enough. So, and I mean, I get I hear the frustration. I'm getting emails, I'm getting phone calls, neighbors, friends that have had their insurance denied, or their rates are so high, they're really questioning whether they can continue to live here. So, those are things that we need. I know we're all working on, and we're moving forward on. And I don't think we can leave anything off the table at this point. I think we need to move forward on individual, on a neighborhood, on a government, and I mean local, state, and federal. And then also look to see if we can work on early detection on wildfires. It's, again, I think nothing can come off the table at this point. Supervisor Fowler.
I will just let you all know that, the Board of Supervisor is doing what it can with the state, the federal, and at the national level too, with the National Counties Association. We are members of various committees, and we are very involved in each of those committees. So like, I'm on the Intergovernmental Disaster Task Force at the national level, and we're all working to try to study this, and it's not just happening here, it's happening across the country.
We don't-
Yeah, I know. I know. I know. Yeah. Still are.
In fact, the vast majority of the action, and that was something I didn't catch with Lindsay and was my fault. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. No, and I think, it's arbitrary to say we had multiple fires and then we have lost homes. We've lost over 60 homes now, and then we have flooding. I mean, the impacts are the impacts, right? But you're right, it really is going to be the board, because it's going to involve community development, and I'm meeting with Jay to talk through some of that and how do we bring those pieces forward to you for consideration. And it's going to involve the county attorney, because there's debates about who has what authority over what. We don't regulate. So people asked me earlier, can you regulate the fire districts? We do not regulate the fire districts. So,
Carry that just to
And,
there's direct damage from fire, but many people have been impacted by flood caused by fire.
that's right.
And the presentation today was about direct fire causation.
Right.
But the two are related. And that's why I think this question is properly before the Flood District Board of Directors, because of the consequential damages that come from flood after fire. So,
And part of that is my role, having served on the Federal Wildland Fire Commission, and Jay's role as a forester. And so that's part of the role we're playing here, to advise, irrespective of whether it's the Board of Supervisors or Board of Directors.
so, as a flood control district director, and also as a member of the Coconino County Board of Supervisors, I just think it's important to note that we work in collaboration and partnership when we talk about things such as of fire mitigation, wildfire risk mitigation. We do not have, either as a flood control district board or as a board of supervisors, we don't have a fire department. That is our municipalities who have fire departments. There are separate independent districts, special districts that can be formed in Coconino County called fire districts, which are funded through taxing those that within that, taxing those that within, live within that fire district and receive the benefit of those fire districts. So, and quite frankly, as both the flood control district board, and also as the, when we wear our hat as the Board of Supervisors, we try to work in coordination and collaboration with our flood control districts, recognizing that they're primarily the responders in the rural parts of Coconino County, sometimes are the first responders in the rural parts of Coconino County. So, all right, any other comments, questions?
Yeah, and I think it is important, just what our chair just said, just mentioned, is that we do not fund, nor do we have authority over the fire districts. They have their own board of directors. So just to clarify that, but we do work with them. Thank you.
And you know, I'm really glad we're doing these. And reason I'm so glad we are doing these is that it is important, number one, that we all understand we're in this together. And we all have to be looking for some solutions together. And I know it's frustrating. We're all frustrated on this. But that doesn't mean we throw up our hands or run out or do whatever. It means that we look at ways that we can come up with options, alternatives, partnerships, collaborations, in hopes that we can move this forward. And I, you know, just for those of you that are here, I share your frustration, I share your concerns, and we aren't giving up. We are going to work together to come up with a solution. So, again, you know, thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. It's not always, it's not always a pleasant, but it is an important conversation. And, you know, I can tell you, I'm frustrated when I hear some of our experts, and that was really wonderful that we had him before us, but it's not giving us a meaningful solution. And maybe it's giving us some ideas that we can merge together for us to come up with a meaningful solution as we move forward. But onward. Yes, Supervisor Ontiveros.
Thank you. And Ms. Andriani, I know that, I believe it was last week, that our Forest Restoration Director, or actually, I guess it came from the Flood Control District, we are launching a community wildfire protection plan kind of program. Could you speak to that just very briefly so that all those in the audience are brought up to date on what is going on? I know that our forest director is in Blue Ridge today. He was in Williams last week. We'll be in Forest Lakes tomorrow. So we are doing things. It just never seems like it is enough. So if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
So important to know that, and Ethan mentioned this, that there was funding created through the Forest Service to both update or establish community wildfire protection plans. And then once you had that plan updated or established, you would be eligible for grants to actually perform the work, like reducing the threat within communities. And so in this county, there was a plan, a community wildfire protection plan, although it needed to be updated for what I call the greater Flagstaff area. And that included City of Flagstaff, Summit Fire, Ponderosa, Pinewood, Highlands, and the Mormon Lake District, Fire District. So took those fire districts in Flagstaff. They are in the process. Flagstaff's leading that effort. It's unfortunately has been going a bit slowly, and they are bringing, I understand they're going to go to the council for approval of the contract on October 7th. Then, in addition to that, the county received a grant, and these are both being funded through the Forest Service program, CWPP. The county received a grant for then the 10 rural fire districts, of which you mentioned several, and the tribal areas, tribal nations, to develop a plan for those areas. And that is underway. We're now conducting the public input process on that in the communities in the rural areas. We'll also be going to Ash Fork and Tucson and other areas. The Fredonia area actually declined to participate. That was their choice, but all the rest of the areas will be involved in the plan. And some of the tribe, I believe the Navajo Nation does have its own plan now as well. So the idea coming out of that is that both projects, projects that can improve, reduce the wildfire risk. And then in addition, we're documenting all of the fire district needs. What do they need in terms of personnel, equipment, that type of thing? And then we understand that's where the grant program would come back in. Now, the grant program, I think the last funding year, if it's funded by Congress again, would be 26, like 26, 27. And so unfortunately, there aren't a lot more grant cycles. We're obviously recommending that we continue to advocate for the extension of that program and the funding to support that. So yes, that information is out there. We've been we've done postcards into the communities to invite people to those sessions, and we will do so for the remaining sessions. And when the sessions begin, the public sessions begin for the Greater Flagstaff, we will get you the dates of those if you want to participate in those.
And it's
Let
not
your
just
community
that
know.
community, it's, we've done them
Yeah.
across Coconino County community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we need to
Thank you.
continue to do that, so.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Vasquez?
Thank you. I just want to say that based on just some of the comments that we've heard and some of the discussion we've had, I just want to remind our community that that is why it's so important for you to attend these public sessions so we can get feedback and for you to engage not just in those sessions, but also get involved with your local fire districts. I know they always can use more people that are volunteering to be involved and help advocate. And then use your advocacy at the state and federal levels, because those are the levels that can actually make change on insurance policy. And so that's where we need your help. We do go as was mentioned by my colleagues, as part of our state and federal lobbying, we do go push for the need for fire insurance and flood insurance reform. But they need to hear from you, their constituents, about this need. And so I just urge you, if you feel strongly about this issue and you want to see change, there's very limited what we can do beyond having these conversations, beyond informing our community. We need your help to go lobby at those higher levels that actually make the policy that can change the laws to make it so that it's more affordable or at least more accessible for our communities. And so I want to thank all of you that are here, that are part of this conversation, listening, and know that there are more series of this topic coming, more presentations. Please stay engaged. We might not be able to have the answers. We might not be able to make the changes directly, but this is part of the education process for our community. So please continue to be engaged and help us move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that. We passed around a sign-up sheet, those that want to continue to get information directly. We don't sell our emails, don't worry. We don't share them with anybody, but that we utilize that very effectively to communicate, particularly like with our flood areas. So if you sign up, then we'll be sure that you get the notifications for the meetings.
Supervisor Fowler?
Yes, Lucinda, if you could remind us all the things that the Coconino County is doing to help with this homeowners insurance, fire-wise programs, mitigation, forest restoration, all the programs that we have and working with all the partners.
I think we have a number of programs, but some of the ones that are specifically going to address the wildfire risk issue relative to insurance are ones that we need to look at much more deeply, like the home hardening and certification, those types, the codes, those kinds of things really need to be looked at as well. But we've been in the forefront. We're one of the few counties across the country that's investing county resources, district resources, in reducing the threat of catastrophic wildfire around both, in and near our communities, as well as the steep slope areas that create the post-wildfire flooding. So, we're out there, and certainly all of you too, out at community meetings and speaking to these, to the need for this and advocating for that, working at, again, all the levels of government. So, Well, thank you very much. And next up is September 30th, 2:15, and we will hear from the IBHS representative. Then you'll get a lot more detail about this wildfire prepared home and what's involved in certifying the homes and the neighborhoods and so forth. So
And that's what the city of Flag is doing, is that correct?
I don't believe it is exactly that's what they're doing, but they're doing a similar type program. So they're doing assessments. I don't know that they're actually they're not doing necessarily certifications. They're providing assessments right now. I think they'd be very interested in, as we've talked about us working together to look at a certification program.
That would be helpful.
So, absolutely.
All right, well.
All righty.
We wanted good news. And again, thank you for community members, those online. We really appreciate your input, cooperation, understanding, and advocacy. And the more we can do to make fire-hardened homes and do defensible space around our homes. Obviously, there are things we can do to protect ourselves now, and we'll work together, hopefully, for our insurance and to protect us all for the future. So thank you.